And we're back. Devin Zoolander coming all the way live from my domicile, sitting here with federal public defender Gabrielle Lee. And to continue with our conversation, I wanted to ask you about the Black Lives Matter movement. And we spoke earlier about high profile cases of unarmed black boys and men and black people in general that have really galvanized the whole community in Pittsburgh, and how they've really just we've become part of history almost when you talk about CNN being here and all of the protests. And I wanted to know how Black Lives Matter has impacted your work.
You know, I think it's interesting seeing some of these issues highlighted. Because when you do this work, you see these issues every day, and maybe not on the large scale where you don't always see police shootings every day in your practice. But I see the fact that black men are getting stopped significantly more than white men. I see that the arrest rates are significantly higher for black men, despite the fact that they're not committing crime at any higher rate. I see so many clients come in are black. And I'm from here. I know the black population in Pittsburgh isn't that high compared to the white population. So why is my ratio of black clients so much higher than, white clients? So seeing the Black Lives Matter movement, seeing these issues highlighted is interesting. And I'm glad that, it's getting the attention. But it's also important for everyone to see that it's a lot more than that. Once we get to the point where someone's getting killed, that's too late. There are so many issues before that. Why are we getting stopped so much? Why are we getting beat up? That may not get the attention as, it would if someone's killed. But these are the issues. And if we're not stopped at the, increased rates, if we're not arrested at these high rates, if we're not targeted at these rates, we won't even get to the point where someone is getting killed or where someone's getting, physically abused by the police.
Yeah. Well, I just had to ask you because I know that James Baldwin quote about to be a Negro or to be black in America is to be in a constant state of rage. And although you're a federal employee, essentially, well, not essentially, you are a federal employee, and you've worked very hard for your career, and you can't just go on social media, or you can't be at massive demonstrations like the way others might be, whether that's because professionally it doesn't work well with what you do, or even if personally that's just not how you choose to fight against these things, which I respect, because as long as you care, then and you're willing to do what you can to make things better, then I'm not here to judge anyone. But I'm glad that you brought up these things that are happening, and how we have to be more preemptive, and we have to see these things kind of coming. And if there are laws that will allow cops, for example, to benefit from doing this and not be held accountable to the degree that the clients that you represent would be held accountable if they were charged with a similar crime, then we have to focus more on getting those laws changed and working through our local policymakers and just educating ourselves. So thank you very much for touching on that. To continue, have you ever experienced racism in college, law school, or in the professional world?
Yes. And where should I start? I mean,
Wherever you would like.
look, I'm young, I'm a woman, and I'm black.
Yes.
And I'm a lawyer.
Yes.
So when I walk into the courtroom, people, that's the last, role that they assume me to be. I've walked into courtrooms and people have asked me if I'm my client's girlfriend. I have been asked if I was a defendant. In fact, a judge ordered me to sit down in juvenile court to make it worse. This was before law school. I was doing my first legal internship, and I had to run something over to a courtroom. I'm in a full suit.
Right.
Court staff knew who I was, but the judge had no idea who I was. So I walked in, and I guess he was getting ready to start a hearing, and he looks at me and he said, "Young lady, you need to take a seat right now," because he thought I was late for court and I was the defendant.
Oh my gosh.
And then his staff is just like,
Yeah,
Nope,
that's
she
nah.
she works for the lawyer.
Right, right, right.
So it happens. It happens often, unfortunately. Even practicing, I've gone to the Erie courthouse and they almost wouldn't let me in without showing multiple forms of ID saying I was a lawyer because unless you're a lawyer, you can't bring a computer into the courthouse.
Right,
And
right.
so showed up, had my bag, had my laptop in it, and it goes through security. And they're like, you can't have this in here. And I was just like, yes, I can. I'm a lawyer. Well, do you have a bar card? Yes, I have a bar card. Showed him a bar card. Do you have an additional form of ID? Sure. Showed
Yeah,
it to him.
yeah.
And it happened 2 days in a row. Same courthouse, same security. So it happens, and it happens frequently.
Hmm. Wow. Well, that's definitely really interesting because it's almost like so obviously people not viewing you as a lawyer is problematic, but them not even viewing you as an adult in some cases is crazy too. And I think to connect with your world, I think sometimes with us, we often say in our community, like, black don't crack or good
Yeah.
black don't crack.
Yeah.
But the drawback to that is that people will weaponize that against us.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, it doesn't matter that I have a grad school degree, it doesn't matter that I've worked at this place and this place. If I'm in the car and I'm listening to rap music and I got my hat on backwards,
Yeah.
then it's you know what I'm going to say. Actually, I'm going to go in a different direction. What I want to say now, because or to finish out that point, they're going to see me as someone that could be someone that's 18 or could be someone that's 30. It doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
But another thing I thought of is how when it comes to black youth, they age us up. So if we're
Yes.
Trayvon Martin, then it's like, oh no, you're not 17, you're 21.
Mm-hmm.
So they age us up. But then when it comes to the professional world, it's like they age us down
Yeah.
and they try to belittle us.
Yeah, absolutely. I have coworkers who will go to the jail in their jeans and maybe a polo or a cardigan. If I go to the jail, I'm in a suit.
Right.
If I'm in any setting, it's almost like I have to prove I'm a lawyer more than they do.
Yeah. You know what? It reminds me of being not so much in college because I went to a HBCU, but for grad school, and I would see white kids and they would be getting dressed up for an internship, sloppy. They might have on Aeropostale cargo pants or something like that, like hair not combed at all. And it's just amazing because for us, that's not how a lot of us have to show up in the world.
No, and I was I mean, I remember growing up, my dad always telling me, you have to be better, you have to do better. And I understood it, but I
Mm-hmm.
didn't really understand it until I was out there and I was, having to prove myself, prove who I am and that I've earned to be here, my right to be here.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I feel you on that, and I'm glad that you touched on that because I think that there are going to be hundreds and thousands of young black women that want to practice law, and they need to have like a real world account of what that all entails. Like it's not just all rosy, like people just accept you and they just be like, oh, well, she got her JD, she's good. It's like, no, there's still hazing and there's still doubt and diminishing that goes on even after you've graduated.
Yeah, there absolutely is. But I will say that, Pittsburgh's a small professional network, and some of my black colleagues are the most badass lawyers that I know. And
Got you.
while they may have worked to like earn their respect,
Mm-hmm.
it's tough and there are hurdles that you're going to have to get over, and there are going to be people who doubt. Um, but it's certainly possible. We're here, we're practicing, we're doing well. So I encourage more young black people to become lawyers. We need more, black people to become lawyers. This
Yeah.
is an old white man's profession.
Yeah. And we need more black people on the juries too.
Oh, absolutely.
Because we already know how that usually plays out when one of us has been killed by the police and we're being put on trial even though we can't stand trial for ourselves because they took us out.
Mhm.
And the jury is comprised of predominantly white people. And we're looking for understanding and fairness from people that, and this is not to vilify white people, but it's to point out that as a man, there's only so much I'm going to be able to process about what your experience is like as a woman.
Mhm.
And there's going to be blind spots that I have that would happen if you were charged with a crime and your jury, or you're accusing someone of a crime.
Hmm.
And we know what kind of crimes those are. And if the jury is mostly men, then men might see themselves actually in the man that is the defendant.
Yeah.
So it's really important to have more diverse looking juries, because we want to, like, we're trying to create the fair process, but there are little loopholes within the process that can still keep us oppressed.
And there's also, the optics. And there is fairness, but then there's also the perception that people have. And when you walk into a courtroom and your lawyer's white and the prosecutor's white, the judge's staff is white, the judge is
The
white,
bailiff, or everybody.
then you have a full white jury. I mean, what is and if you step outside and you go to your neighborhood, that's not what it looks like.
Right.
So just the perception of fairness, plays a role too.
Absolutely. Well, I just pulled up this long article that I didn't even get a chance to read. But what
Okay.
we'll do is we'll go to the top what the headline says, and
Uh-oh.
then we'll bounce off of that. So so this is an article from December 7th, 2020, from the San Diego Union Tribune. This is an opinion piece. The bar exam is stained with inequality and racism. It needs to be abolished. That's quite a powerful statement. Now, I have to
Yes.
admit, I haven't talked to a lot of lawyers or law school graduates to know how they feel about the bar exam, whether it's fair for everyone. But I just wanted to get, what is your, I mean, obviously you passed it, but what are your feelings towards the bar exam, and do there need to be any kind of, I don't know, not renovations, but improvements that can be made to the process of becoming a lawyer? And specifically, what does that look like for us as black people that want to practice law, but we feel like we have obstacles that are preventing us from doing so?
Yeah, so I don't have much of an opinion on the racist aspects of the bar exam. Do I think it's a waste? Absolutely, and it's not a reflection of anything you learned in law school. It's not a reflection of how you practice law. It's a multiple choice exam and then a bunch of essays.
And we're back. So, when we last left off, we were talking about perceived racial bias as a part of the bar exam, and you were saying how you don't have an opinion on whether the bar assessment is racially biased, but you do have an opinion on it being an archaic form of evaluating whether someone is ready to practice law.
Yeah, so, when you practice law, first off, you don't really go based on memory. You take a certain amount of classes in law school. There are so many classes I didn't even take. So, if you ever get divorced, don't call me because I don't know a single thing
Got you.
about your divorce. I
Okay.
couldn't tell you what to do
Okay.
about custody.
Right.
There are certain things you just don't know unless you took the class.
Mm-hmm.
And so, when you take this bar exam, it's based on, these core classes. And of course, one is family law, and I didn't take the class. And it's a bunch of multiple choice questions, but that's not how you practice. Um, when my clients come to me, it's like obviously there are things that I know just from practicing. Um, but my practice is a lot of researching and writing. It's like I don't know the exact answer because I have to consider, what are all the courts doing? Are there any recent cases that came out? Are there any pending cases before the Supreme Court? So there's so much I have to research. It's not as simple as, okay, this law is this is what it says, 2 + 2 = 4, you're going to serve 10 years. It's just not how the law works. So to use a multiple choice exam and just memorize as many laws as you can, it's essentially useless.
Mm. Well, I appreciate that perspective because, like we said, whether and I'm sure if we typed in racial bias, I mean this goes back to the SATs or standardized exams in general. So if there is some racial bias involved in some of these exams, including the bar exam, then I'm sure neither one of us would be surprised.
Oh yeah, I'm not saying there
Yeah.
isn't. It's just I
Right.
I don't know. Is it fair to assume that there is? Absolutely,
Right.
absolutely. We're a lot of the systems that we work around are inherently racist.
Right. There you go. I got you. So I think you kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, but I'll ask it again, or I'll ask it this time. As an experienced lawyer, what advice would you give to a young, aspiring lawyer?
Sure. So, and I did touch on this part briefly, but
Mm-hmm.
shop around for law schools. Um, you know, when I was going to law school, in my mind, I was either going to come back home in Pittsburgh, move into my parents' basement, save up as much money as possible,
Right.
or I was going to Miami and I was living it up for 3 years while I did law school.
Yeah, yeah.
I made the smarter decision, and
I, I, I
I
think I think so.
yeah, I moved into the basement and I saved money. But law schools will almost pay you to go there if you find the right one. You shouldn't be paying $40,000 a year that's going to take you the rest of your life to get back. So that's my first piece of advice. Law schools have the money, make them pay. Um, Second piece of advice is do internships that interest you. Feel things out. Don't necessarily go for, I mean, obviously, if someone's offering you a decent amount of money, try it out.
Right,
Um,
right.
but don't get stuck doing something just because you have to financially.
Hmm. All right. So shop around and do an internship that you're interested in.
Hmm.
All right. I think those are two good pieces of advice. So now I want to ask you, what has been the most rewarding moment of your career?
The most rewarding moment of my career. Still early in my career.
True, true.
Um,
It's only been 5 years, you know what I'm saying? You still wet behind it? No, I'm just playing.
No, I think one of the most rewarding things actually happened over the summer. With COVID going on and people being really sick, I was doing a lot of work trying to get people out of prisons who were really sick and could potentially die if they're exposed to COVID. And I had a client who was essentially seemed like he was dying in prison and not receiving any care. And I was able to get him out of prison, get him to a hospital, and actually get him home so he can get treatment. So
That's
that
great.
was like my first major, post conviction release, and so that was really rewarding. And it was rewarding on a, personal side, just being able to call his family and say, hey, he's coming home. Just being able to say that, being able to call a family member and say, hey, the person that you love, the person, who is 100% human to you, your dad, your brother, your husband, like he's coming home, and just hearing that joy is amazing.
Hmm. Yeah, that sounds amazing because, as we know, when we start talking about political prisoners, people that, like, because I know, and I'm not fully aware of everything that goes around this case, but I know Mamiya Abu Jamal, for example, in Philadelphia, I think back in the late 70s, he was involved in a police shooting where an officer died, and since then he's been imprisoned, and there's a huge movement around him that says like he didn't do this, and it was someone else that did it. But regardless, he's in prison and he's been there for like 40 years, and he's like highly intelligent, and he writes books, and he just has legions of followers that support him. He's a black man as well, but I remember before seeing some updates about his physical condition, and when you put COVID on top of the fact that he's malnourished and he's definitely being neglected, and you look at what toll that's taken on him. I think he's been near death a couple times. It just really is awful that he's going through that, because that, that's just horrible. Even if someone is guilty, like where's the humanity in how you treat them? But then to hear a positive story about how you had a client that was enduring some really harsh conditions and being able to help facilitate their release so that they can get the help that they need. I think that was really important. So I'm glad that we can recognize the reality that that's not reality for a lot of people that are locked up that are able to get away from COVID, but we're also able to look at the triumph in that situation with your client.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I don't think you expect becoming a lawyer, especially a criminal defense attorney, is how much you lose. The laws are stacked against you. You have, especially in the federal context, you have the FBI, the entire federal agencies, and you have prosecutors who are choosing their cases. So obviously they want to choose cases that they think they can win.
Mm-hmm.
And over 90% of cases result in a guilty plea. Um, so when you have wins, and you may, sometimes you view it as a win, and not necessarily like, you have to remember that this is, a client's life. But one of the things you learn is you have to celebrate the small wins too. You may have a client who's facing a mandatory minimum of 15 years for something, and you may be able to get that mandatory, removed, and they serve 10 years. 10
Mm-hmm.
years sounds absolutely horrible.
Yeah.
Um, but in some circumstances,
It's the best outcome.
yeah.
Yeah.
So they tell you to reevaluate a win, and it's a tough thing to adjust to because there's just so much negative in the practice. But whenever you do have those really positive days, it's worth it.
Wow. Well, I must say that this has been a really cool conversation, and I'm so glad that we were able to set this up. I know that you have a hectic schedule, but I appreciate you giving me your time.
Hey, thanks for having me. I enjoyed it.
No problem. Now, before we get off camera, because now what we're going to do is we have a couple fun pictures to take. I'm gonna play some music. We're gonna have fun. We're gonna make silly faces. All the lawyer stuff.
Sure.
And that's going to be a good time. But I didn't have a chance to wrap and put it in a special container, but I did pick up a couple things for you that I want you to have. And on the Devin Zoolander show, we like to call what I'm about to give you a little something something.
A little something, something.
Yeah, a little something
A little
something
something,
something.
something.
So I'm going to go ahead and get that real quick.
All right.
And you can tell me how great I am.
All right. I'll prepare my Devin Zoolander is the best speech while you're gone.
Yeah. We need those testimonials. And we're back. So we've come to the end of our interview, but I could not let you leave here empty-handed. So I would like to present you with the following gifts that are just a piece of my heart, a token of my appreciation, aka a little something something. So, number one.
Oh. Lemongrass coconut body oil.
Yep.
I like.
From Trader Joe's. So, you know what I'm saying?
With Trader Joe's.
You can do your thing, and you got some sun recently. Recently, I don't think that has anything to do with SPF or whatever that stuff is called. But anyway, it's still nice moisturizing stuff and smells great. All right, second thing right here is for you. Here you are.
Oh, can never go wrong without this. Yeah, with this.
Right. We got some dishwashing liquid
trying to tell me I need to go home and wash some dishes?
I'm just.
Is that what you're saying?
I'm just saying.
Is that what you're saying?
Oh, maybe. But what I'm really saying is that if you must do chores, then at least let the scent be something that is enjoyable. So
I appreciate that because I do like lemongrass scent.
So to be clear here, you have lemongrass.
This is a theme.
Coconut body oil. You have lemongrass dishwashing liquid. And for your third gift.
It's not a cookie.
No. What is in your third gift? Let's check it out.
Lemongrass soap.
Yes.
It's not edible, but I'm still excited about this.
Right. But it smells good. It'll put you in a good frame of mind. So,
awesome. Thank you.
So, yeah, no problem. And just to give you a brief explanation, the reason behind this is just because I really enjoy the scent, the essential oil that is lemongrass. I really appreciate that. That's my favorite one. I know some people be like chamomile or lavender, bergamot,
lavender.
All that stuff.
I hate lavender.
Lilac, whatever. But, for me, I always got to bring it back to the lemongrass.
I like lemongrass.
So whenever I see something like that, I'm like, hey yo, I gotta hook up all my guests with that.
Oh, yeah. I'm excited about that. Even the dish liquid, even though I think you're,
I'm not
throwing a little shade.
No, I ain't throwing
little shade.
Look, I ain't never been in your kitchen. I don't know what's going on over there. That I didn't have a little birdie tell me that, hey yo, Gabrielle over there, the person you about to have on your show. Yeah, let me tell you about her kitchen. Because I know what mine is like, so.
I loaded my dishwasher this morning, for the record.
One day I want to have a dishwasher just so I can not use it and just be like, wow, all this time, 9 years in the same apartment, never had a dishwasher. I used to complain all the time about how I don't have one. If I had one, I would use it, only to not use it. So.
Yeah, growing up, we had one. At least in the house that I spent most of my life in. But my dad unplugged it and told us it was broken our entire lives. And I found out later because he thought people who use dishwashers are lazy. So it was never broken. He just unplugged it and we couldn't use it.
Come on, Dad.
Yep.
Wow.
So I use mine now.
Yeah, absolutely. You got to make up for lost time.
Oh, yeah.
And we're back. This has been such a great experience. I feel like I've come away with a lot more insight, a lot more real world perspective into the life of a criminal defense attorney. So I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. And lastly, is there anything else you would like to say?
Oh man, put me on the spot.
It's all right. It's all right. You don't. I mean, you don't have to say anything. I mean, I did put you on the spot, so don't worry. You don't have
No,
to say.
it's okay.
Yeah, like we'll just okay.
Oh, you know what? I do have something to say. Yeah, I mean, I think the last thing I'd say is for people to pay attention. Don't just pay attention to the news. Pay attention to what's going on here. Whether it's Pittsburgh or whatever your community is. Show up to the courts, sit there and watch. I mean, courts are open to the public. It's on Zoom now. Like, you don't even have to leave your house to watch what goes on in the courthouses. So just don't rely on what you see on the news because there's way more going on. There are way bigger issues, beyond, what you see on CNN.